I was lying in a hospital bed with stitches still burning in my side when my son stood at the foot of the bed and said something I never thought I would hear in my lifetime. Just 2 days earlier, I had signed the papers and given him one of my kidneys because that's what fathers do. We give everything we have to keep our children alive. I thought I had saved his life, but the look in his eyes that morning wasn't gratitude. It was cold, distant, like I was suddenly a problem he needed to solve. And that was the moment I realized something was terribly wrong, because the son I believed I raised would never look at his father that way. We live in Asheville, North Carolina. I bought a small house up in the hills back in 1984, a place with a wide porch where I expected to grow old with my wife, Martha. I spent 30 years working for the city water department, climbing into trenches and fixing pipes so my son, Tyler, could have the things I didn't. When Martha passed away 6 years ago, it was just the two of us. Tyler was my world. He was a bright kid, always quick with a joke, and he'd built a decent career for himself in pharmaceutical sales down in Charlotte. I was proud of him. I told everyone at the diner that my boy was the kind of man who'd make something of himself. The trouble started on a Tuesday in November. Tyler had come up for the weekend, but he looked gray. He was exhausted, sleeping until noon, and he barely touched the pot roast I'd made. A week later, he called me from a clinic. His kidneys were failing. He didn't say it was urgent at first, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. By January, he was on dialysis 3 times a week. Watching your only child waste away is a special kind of hell. He'd sit in my living room, his skin sallow and his eyes sunken, talking about how he might not see his 35th birthday. I didn't even hesitate. I told the doctors I wanted to be tested. I'm 68 years old, but I've stayed fit, and the tests came back as a near-perfect match. The surgeon at Duke University Hospital told me the risks for a man my age, but I didn't care about the risks. I cared about the boy who used to sit on my shoulders to reach the apples in the backyard. We spent months preparing, going through psychological evaluations and blood work. Tyler seemed different during that time, quiet, almost reverent. He kept telling me he'd make it up to me. He said I was his hero. 3 days ago, we went under the knife. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took me was Tyler reaching across the gap between our gurneys and squeezing my hand. I woke up in pain, but I was happy. I was groggy, but I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. My son was going to live. But then came that second morning, when the morphine started to wear off and Tyler walked into my room, fully dressed, looking at a folder in his hand instead of at me. "Dad, we need to talk about the house," Tyler said, his voice flat as a board. I tried to sit up, but the pain in my side flared like a hot iron, forcing me back onto the pillows. I thought he was joking, or maybe he was just stressed about the recovery, but he didn't move toward me. He didn't ask if I needed water or if the nurses were treating me well. He just stood there by the window, looking out at the parking lot. He told me that while I was under, he'd had a long talk with a financial advisor and his wife, Sarah. I'd always liked Sarah, or at least I thought I did. She was from a wealthy family in Raleigh, the kind of people who looked at my calloused hands like they were a curiosity. Tyler explained that his medical bills were astronomical, even with insurance, and that his business had taken a hit while he was sick. "The equity in your place," he said, tapping the folder. "It's just sitting there. It's a waste." I looked at him, confused by the fog of the medication. I reminded him that the house was all I had left of his mother. I told him I'd worked 39 years for the city of Columbus, though in my head, I was back in Asheville, the memories of the 2 stories blurring in my pain. I told him I had built our savings slowly and honestly. But Tyler wasn't listening to stories about the past. He told me that since I had gifted him the kidney, it was only logical that I help him secure his financial future too. He leaned over and set a document on my overbed table. It was a quit-claim deed. He wanted me to sign over the house to him so he could use it as collateral for a massive consolidation loan. "It's just a formality, Dad," he said, using the exact words I'd heard in a nightmare once before. "It's not really a risk." He told me it would be better for my credit and that it would prevent the bank from ever coming after me if things got tight. I felt a coldness settle in my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in the hospital. I looked at my son, the man I had raised and given everything to. I realized that he hadn't been quiet and reverent during those months of testing because he was grateful. He had been waiting. He'd been waiting until he had the organ inside him, until the gift was permanent and couldn't be taken back. "And if I say no?" I asked, my voice cracking. Tyler finally looked me in the eye, and for the first time, I saw the stranger living behind his face. "Then I don't know how I'm supposed to afford the anti-rejection meds, Dad. You want this kidney to go to waste because you're being sentimental about a pile of bricks?" I didn't sign the papers that morning. I told him I needed time to think, but what I really needed was to stop the world from spinning. Tyler left the room without a word, leaving the quitclaim deed sitting on the tray next to my untouched plastic cup of water. The hospital room, which had felt like a place of healing just hours ago, now felt like a cage. I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how a man could have his son's life inside him while his son was already calculating the value of his father's displacement. By that evening, Sarah showed up. She didn't bring flowers. She brought a laptop and a sense of efficiency that made my skin crawl. She sat in the vinyl chair and explained that they had already looked into senior living options in Charlotte. She spoke about it like she was doing me a favor, moving me closer to them so they could keep an eye on me. But I knew what that meant. It meant a room with a single window and a life lived on their terms. "Richard," she said, using my first name instead of Dad, just like she always did. "We have to think about the long-term stability of the family." She told me that Tyler's recovery would be slow and that he couldn't return to the high-stress environment of sales right away. They needed the liquidity from my house to bridge the gap. When I asked what would happen to me if the consolidation loan failed, she just adjusted her glasses and said I was being unnecessarily emotional. I realized then that they weren't asking. They were informing me. They had waited until I was at my most vulnerable, stitched up and recovering from major surgery, to strike. That night, after the nurses did their rounds, I called an old friend from the water department, Frank. He had a brother who was a retired attorney in Asheville. "Frank," I whispered into the phone, my voice shaking with more than just physical pain. "I think I've made a terrible mistake. Not about the kidney, but about who I gave it to." I told him I needed to see a lawyer before I was discharged, and I needed it kept quiet. I knew then that the recovery ahead of me wasn't just going to be about my body. It was going to be a fight for the very ground I stood on. The lawyer Frank recommended was a man named Miller, a straight shooter who came to my hospital room the next afternoon. He didn't wear a fancy suit, just a worn blazer and a look of deep concern as he sat where Sarah had been sitting the night before. I told him everything: the surgery, the quitclaim deed, and the threat about the anti-rejection meds. He looked at the paperwork Tyler had left behind and shook his head slowly. "Richard, this isn't just a request for help," Miller said quietly. "This is a predatory move. If you sign this, you lose all legal claim to your home, and you'll have no say in how that loan is managed." He explained that since I was still under the influence of post-operative medications, any signature I gave right now could be contested, but it was better not to let it get that far. He told me to keep my mouth shut and let him handle the procedural side of things. An hour after the lawyer left, Tyler came back. He looked healthier already, the color returning to his cheeks thanks to the organ I'd given him. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He just looked at the tray. "Did you sign it yet, Dad?" "I'm not signing it, Tyler," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. He didn't yell. He just leaned over the bed, his face inches from mine. "Then you're making a choice, Dad. If you won't help us, we can't afford to take care of you. We've already started the paperwork for a state-run facility near Charlotte. It's what your Social Security can cover." I looked at my son and saw the cold calculation of a man who had already moved on from being a son. "I gave you a part of my body," I whispered. "And I'm grateful," he replied, without a hint of warmth. "But gratitude doesn't pay the mortgage. If you want to keep that house so bad, you can figure out how to live in it alone while you're recovering. Because we're done." He walked out, and for the first time in 53 years, I realized I was truly on my own. The following week was a blur of antiseptic smells and the muffled sounds of the recovery wing. I was discharged from the hospital on a Tuesday morning, but there was no celebratory ride home. Tyler and Sarah didn't show up. Instead, it was Frank who pulled his old truck up to the curb, helping me into the passenger seat with a gentleness my own blood had forgotten. When I got back to my house in Asheville, the silence was heavy. I sat in my armchair, looking at the photos on the mantel, all three of us at his graduation, Martha laughing in the background. I realized then that Tyler hadn't just taken a kidney. He had taken the piece I'd spent 40 years building. 2 days after I got home, a certified letter arrived. It wasn't from a bank, but from a law office representing Tyler and Sarah. It stated that they were initiating a claim for equitable reimbursement. They were arguing that because they had provided me with care and housing over the previous 3 years, even though I lived in my own home and paid my own way, I owed them $140,000. It was a transparent attempt to force a sale of the house. I called Miller immediately. His voice was grim. "They're trying to create a debt where none exists to trigger a lien," he explained. But as he dug into the documents Tyler had filed to support the claim, he found something that stopped my heart. Among the evidence was a signed agreement dated last October where I supposedly agreed to pay for their consultation and management services. I stared at the digital copy Miller sent over. The signature at the bottom looked exactly like mine, but I had been in the hospital with a minor infection that entire week. I hadn't signed a single thing. My son had forged my name while I was sick, preparing the trap before he even went into the operating room with me. He didn't just want my house. He had planned to steal it while he was telling me I was his hero. I felt a coldness in my marrow that had nothing to do with the winter air coming off the Blue Ridge Mountains. Miller told me that forgery was a serious criminal offense, but pursuing it meant putting my son in the crosshairs of the district attorney. "If we move forward with a forensic audit of that signature," Miller warned, "there's no going back. This becomes a police matter." I sat in my quiet kitchen, looking at the same table where I had once helped Tyler with his math homework, and I realized he had counted on my love to act as his shield. I called Tyler one last time. I didn't want to talk about money or houses. I wanted to see if there was any piece of the boy I raised left inside that man. "Did you do it?" I asked him, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you sign my name while I was lying in that hospital bed back in October?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that tells you everything you need to know. Then, his voice came back, sharp and defensive. "I was trying to protect the family, Dad. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. If the business fails, we lose everything." He didn't even deny it. He just justified it, as if stealing my life's work was a necessary sacrifice for his own comfort. "You used me, Tyler," I said. "You waited until you had the kidney, and then you moved in for the rest. Don't make this bigger than it is," he snapped, using that phrase that seems to be the favorite of every man trying to hide a sin. "Just sign the refinance papers and the lawsuit goes away. We can all go back to being a family." I hung up the phone. I realized then that the family he was talking about didn't exist anymore. It was a ghost I was chasing while he was already picking over my bones. I called Miller back and gave him the only instruction I had left. I told him to file the dispute and request the forensic review. 3 days later, the detectives called. They had questions about the management agreement and the dates I was admitted to the hospital. I gave them my statement, every painful word of it. As I walked out of the station, I felt a weight leave me, replaced by a hollow ache. I had saved his life with my body, And now I was potentially ending his freedom with my truth. The forensic report came back on a Tuesday, exactly 6 weeks after the surgery. The experts confirmed what I already knew. My signature had been digitally lifted and placed onto the fraudulent agreement. Faced with the evidence, the bank withdrew its claim, and the district attorney moved forward with charges of identity theft and financial exploitation of the elderly. Tyler didn't call to apologize. He only sent one final text through his lawyer's phone, asking how I could do this to my own son. I sat on my porch in Asheville and watched the sun dip behind the mountains, feeling the phantom itch of the stitches in my side. I had given him a part of myself to keep him alive, but I couldn't give him a conscience. The house is quiet now, and I've changed the locks. I still have the scars from the operation, and sometimes, when the weather turns cold, my side aches where the kidney used to be. I don't regret the gift, because I did what a father is supposed to do. But I've learned that blood doesn't always mean loyalty, and love doesn't always mean protection. I'm 71 years old, and I'm spending my days learning how to live for myself again, in the house my wife and I built with our own hands. My son has his life, and I have my truth. And for now, that has to be enough. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. There's more to come.